Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of EdTech Connect Innovators in Conversation. Today, we have a very exciting episode planned. Back for another episode, Eric Stano, our Vice President for Product Strategy, joined today by Mitch Colver, Vice President and Associate Provost for Engagement and Retention with American Public University System. How are you guys?
Doing
Oh,
well.
good. Good to be here.
Yeah, exciting. I know we were talking a little bit about the weather before we were getting started and hitting record. So, as Eric knows, I love to do icebreaker questions, and this is actually going to be our icebreaker question today. Is if you were a form of weather, what form would you be and why?
So I guess I can take the first shot at this, Eric.
Please do.
I definitely would be some kind of water type event. I feel like water over a rock a lot. So,
Okay.
when I encounter any kind of obstacle, I'm always finding the way through it, over it, around it. What can I do to move forward and not, make concessions that will ultimately, give up the goal of the project? And so if I don't know, if I'm a rainstorm and the rippling streams that flow down the mountain thereafter, that's the weather event that represents my approach.
Wow. Okay, this is not what I expected. It got really deep. Okay, Eric, your turn. You
Well,
gotta top that though.
as much as I have come to believe at my age that the concept of spring is related to a Mandela effect, we all are convinced it exists and it never actually happens for anyone. I would probably characterize myself as a nice spring day. I try and put people at ease, make them feel comfortable. It's a little bit of the people pleaser in me. So my event is the complete absence of a weather event. Sunny skies.
Okay.
Wait,
Sunny
does that
skies.
mean that never actually arrives? You like
It's
you like the idea of being spring, but you never actually deliver.
Well played, Mitch.
Uh, no, Eric, I know you to be a lovely spring day. Thou art more lovely and more temperate.
Yeah. Oh, and I have a Shakespeare themed meeting a little bit later today, so thanks for that. And I'm not kidding.
Amazing. Well, I like these answers. They're not what I expected, but I think it's a good indication just in the energy that we have now where today's conversation is going to go. So, without more icebreakers, probably to both of your happiness, because I won't grill you there, we're going to jump right into getting into deeper discussion points and around the theme of today's conversation of AI literacy, AI native curriculum, and really designing learning for the participator economy. So we've been seeing a lot of discussions in education forums, on the news, and really how AI adoption is increasing, but still remaining at potentially a surface level for some users, while others are going way deeper into it and building, creating nonstop. So we're seeing a divide emerge between observers and participants. From your perspectives, where are you already seeing this gap show up in higher education and course development?
I know for
Mhm.
me that I really worry about our students. There is this real risk of what's called a barbell economy, as you've just described. And the reality is that barbell is a large mass of non-participant observers who are, for various reasons, choosing to either bury their heads in the sand or not get involved or not feel like it's not their thing. It's not for me. And then there's a narrow kind of strip of a gap, and then another large mass of individuals who are perfectly happy to participate in generative AI exploration and adoption, and who are really learning its strengths and limitations in many environments, personal, professional, educational. And that barbell shape where you have two large masses and a gap, chasm in between, really isn't what you want as the future arrives, because it creates a situation of haves and haves nots who are not in conversation with one another. And that I worry about that. From our students' perspective, I also think that to be on the side where you're participating, but only as a cheater, which I do know many students across the nation are in that category where they're using it, but they're not using it to its full potential and with integrity. I think that also places them, unfortunately, on the barbell side of non-participants, that they're as bad off or perhaps worse off than people who aren't using it at all. And that gap will manifest in their careers as well, right? Whatever they don't learn and work out in the educational environment, that will just intensify as they enter the professional one. So if they were cheaters at the university, they're going to try to show up and cheat at work. And guess what? Cheaters never prosper, and it's always only a matter of time until they get caught. Getting caught in higher education, the stakes are a little bit lower. Getting caught in a professional environment, that's where it's much higher, escalated. And I have that concern for our students that if they're not participating or if they're participating in ways that lack integrity, they really are going to be left behind.
Yeah, I agree with virtually everything that Mitch said, and from my own vantage point, which is obviously a little bit different. I work for a services company. We provide those digital services to institutions like APUS or EdTech companies, educational publishers, just institutions of learning, broadly speaking. I see that there is, within my ecosystem, companies like Magic and other similar companies have fully embraced the AI possibilities. We have staffed up. We've added to competencies. We've had people upskilling relative to being able to utilize AI for uh, a diversity of purposes. I'll sort of narrow my focus to one, which is course development, which is what we help a lot of our partners do. And what we see on the other side of our partners side, so faculty and industry leaders at ed tech companies and the like, they too are embracing it. They're a little perhaps a step or two behind. And that gives us an opportunity to demonstrate a little bit of leadership in certain situations. But they're more constrained oftentimes from investing in the same way. Where I have concerns are those that Mitch was expressing, where it is not being adopted or not being adopted to perhaps the most profitable ends for the user. Um, is around students, where I see and students are from my position in the world. I know Mitch's as well. Students are the people I think about. The courses I develop are meant to serve them, and I think about what's going to give them the best possible outcomes. And I know the students are thinking of their own outcomes as well, but for them, too often, I think the outcomes that they're striving for are a grade, and that is different than learning. So they're using AI in much of my experience. I won't say it's everyone, of course, but they're using it, as Mitch referenced, to get by, to deliver an artifact and get that grade and move on. And I worry about the possibility of AI. The potential comes from one. I see it as one being able to really spend the time that AI is giving us to develop things like critical thinking and judgment and ethical sensibilities and such. And if you're just using it to get something off your to-do list that your professor or your teacher is expecting, you're probably not immersing yourself in the space that's going to help you develop, as a good student, as a good citizen, et cetera. So I worry about students. Apologies, that was a very long answer to a question. I'm not sure I fully answered it either, but I put enough
Yeah.
words out there.
No, I was gonna say, I feel like you both are covering relatively the same underlying theme, which is with the integrity, the execution, making an impact with the AI usage. This really all leads back into this overarching theme of AI literacy. And we were talking about the student standpoint and maybe even a little bit into the instructors. But one can use AI and still say surface level, and one may say, okay, that's just maybe some form of literacy, but we're still really in the early adoption phase there. Now we need to go deeper and use it effectively and actually drive outcomes to get to the full literacy. So I want to go deeper into that and explaining maybe what that meaningful fluency actually looks like, not just for the students, but for faculty, for the instructional designers, curriculum leaders, or just knowing beyond the surface level of which tools are existing and just prompting it to find out how to rephrase your email follow up.
Well, and I think based on what Eric was saying about immersion, from the student perspective, the switch point between being an observer or a participant who's maybe not using it to its fullest potential and being an active participant who's really benefiting in ways that are meaningful is not a huge delta. It requires students. We had a good example from a student who didn't want to use AI to cheat. So it literally said to ChatGPT, we I have this paper. Here's what it is. I don't want to cheat. So what I need you to do is interview me. You need to help me figure out what my main opinions about this topic are. You need to help me figure out what my authentic thesis for this 2-page paper is going to be, and then help me organize my thoughts around an outline, because I can talk stream of consciousness about this topic for minutes and minutes and minutes, but I don't necessarily feel like I'm ready or feel organized around writing a paper, even though I have a lot of opinions. So they provided as a submission that chat log so that the instructor could see this process of using GPT but avoiding cheating. And GPT did beautifully with that. That kind of approach is not a heavy lift on the part of the student. Literally prompting GPT to say, hey, I want all the help you can give me, but I don't want you to help me cheat. What was also cool is they had used GPT to write the original prompt. So they had said, if I'm going to ask you for your help, but I don't want you to help me cheat, what do I need to enter initially in order for that to go well?
Hmm.
And then they used that structured prompt in order to kick off the particular conversation that was submitted. This is a really clever,
Wow.
it's a clever utilization. I think the same is true for faculty or instructional designers. And Eric, you may feel the same, but it's this idea of get in there and play with it, experiment, try some things out. It's that using and testing and pushing that is really going to develop the awareness of what the strengths and limitations are and how to use it with appropriateness.
Yeah, and I think
Hmm.
that I love the example that Mitch just gave, because I struggle with this piece of it, and I think we can close the delta a bit that Mitch was talking about. It's around anthropomorphizing AI in the right way. I mean, there's obviously concerns about people imbuing it with intelligence and character that it does not have, but AI is not Google. AI is, these are large language models with whom we are meant to be conversing, and remembering that aspect of it, having that conversation, and in that respect, treating it as though you're talking to a person, treating it as though you're going to office hours for your instructor, and asking those good questions to get you to a place where you can therefore harness your abilities, sharpen your abilities, and move yourself ethically towards the artifact or the outcomes that you're trying to achieve in whatever setting. I think is a clever way of reframing it, and I'm hopeful that people begin to understand that this is not just pushing a button and getting your artifact. It's not how you get your coffee in a hotel lobby in the morning. This is something that's meant to be a dialectic between you and another thing that can functionally converse with you and help you in that way.
And I think part
Right.
part of why something I would add is what are the resistances to diving in, right? Because I think that
Yeah.
this is something we have to acknowledge is that there are incentives for participating, but for a certain subset of our professionals, faculty, instructional designers, even our students, part of why they're holding back and their holdouts is that is this exact agentic issue, that it's not just a hammer. It has a an intelligence like quality that gives them pause, that gives them critical awareness. I've even seen some arguments against use of AI that are related to water waste that don't make sense so long as you extract them from the feeling that this is a new technology that has human-like qualities. And I can give you some numbers here that I think make a lot of sense to me. So people will say it uses a lot of water, but we know just in the United States, golf courses are currently using 30 times as much water as the entire AI enterprise. When golf courses were being invented, and now there's more than 16,000 in the United States, as they were being placed all around, the world, uh, I didn't see people saying we should stop golfing because of the water issue. But with AI, it's like people are lined up to say we should stop AIing because of the water issue. I'll give you another one. Residential lawns. Residential lawns use 100 times as much water as AI is currently using. I don't see people lined up. Well, I do actually see people lined up here and there, particularly out
Yeah,
here in the
I
West.
was going to pipe in. I've been to California.
That's right. So we're tackling that problem perhaps in spaces and places, but nobody's standing and picketing for lawns, or at least not a large number of people, the same number that are picketing for AI. Oh, it's using water. And then you don't even have to stretch it into nature, because I think there's some arguments, well, but it's nature and it's different. Let's just talk about the advent of the laptop itself. Laptops, which are prolific in the United States alone, laptops use as much in terms of manufacturing and utilization in a given year. They use as much water as AI is currently using. And when they were invented, you didn't see people saying, "Well, I don't know about these laptops because dang it, they're going to use a lot of water."
Mm,
And so you have to ask, why is AI a sticking point as it relates to water when these other forms of technology or the other forms of water usage have come and gone without that kind of scrutiny? And I think the scrutiny comes from, well, but I also have an emotional hang up about this being quasi human, well, anthropomorphic, just like you say, Eric. And that is the holding point, right? The holding point is I don't like it because of what it is. Therefore, I'm going to come up with these arguments that seem, not to use a bad pun, seem to hold water on the
mm,
surface, but upon further or deeper
Nicely done.
inspection are a little bit spurious, because those same arguments could be made about any front of technology and aren't being made.
mhm,
And I think that is also perhaps exacerbated by the fact that um, it is too short and straight a line to use AI to simply scratch an itch, to simply achieve the goal there. And if we're in talking about students, something that I have sort of quietly advocated for from my perch is this move towards, for instance, this move towards oral examinations in various settings, so that we hold students to account for the actual learning that they are ostensibly enrolled to achieve, to give them the habit of learning, let them develop the muscles around those things that are going to serve them. Because, it's not just people who are in a learner setting or a student. I think anybody given a tool reflexively as a human, you're going to say, "Oh, I can leap the line here and get that thing done, move on, get the rest of my day accomplished." We need to figure out environments and structures and pedagogical frameworks where the value of moving a student through that process is evident, because it's just too powerful a tool, and the temptation is too great. One needs to have some agency to say, I am going to develop some AI fluency here. I am going to develop these competencies in myself. This is why I'm here in school. And I'm going to, and I know I have an oral exam to give that I can't cheat my way through. So I'm going to spend the time figuring out
Yeah.
the right ways to use AI in the way that's going to truly ultimately benefit me.
Right. And I think going back to just tying it to what Mitch, you were saying earlier, where should this inspiration to use AI, such as in the way Eric was explaining, or that student did in coaching rather than just going to it for answers, where does that motivation, discipline, or inspiration come from? Is that then the responsibility of these higher education institutions, instructors to coach that? Or where should we look towards to get that kind of discipline with this usage?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it behooves educators to, if they're feeling uncomfortable about some of the ways that students might naturally or organically choose to use AI, then it behooves them to be the ones who say how to use it alternatively or more substantively. And so I do know that some of our departments, like our Department of English is a really good example at American Public University system. We have an English department that's very proactive at helping students to understand the strengths and limitations of generative AI and helping them to understand utilizations that are within bounds so that they don't use it out of bounds, but also so that they see the advantages of using it as a tool to its fullest potential rather than merely reducing it to a way to cheat. I do think that that is the winning cultural strategy, is that if we expect or have hopes for students to use it with integrity, that we are in fact the ones standing waving the flag saying, well, move this way or head this way, because over here there's green pastures of utilization that really are going to benefit you as a student, as a learner, but also in your life and in your profession, that you should want to use it as a lifelong learner. And I've given other podcasts and other presentations where Gen AI for lifelong learning is the mainstay of those presentations. And I'm consistently surprised at how novel some of the applications are to attendees, to listeners. Oh, I didn't realize, like, you use it as a training coach, as a nutritionist, as a dating support advisor, in your dating life. You use it for parenting advice. Like, the utilization or use case, the appropriate use cases are endless, but we can't discover those or stumble upon them unless we're actually even just trying and experimenting and seeing how it goes.
Right, and it's those habits of mind that I think are critical, and Kiara, you and I have had this conversation in different settings, and I find myself having it frequently. Ideally, that sort of, those habits of mind start in the home, just like, if you wanna develop kids as readers, you wanna make reading available and encourage it in the home, but oftentimes what's going to happen is when the student gets into their first formal learning environment, that's the crucible in which the habits of mind are really begin to take shape and are shaped, around the students. So, I think it's also, I have to acknowledge, it's such a pronounced change that's being asked on the part of faculty. The idea of implementing oral exams in order to get an authentic read on whether a student has mastered some skill, some corpus of knowledge is a huge shift and an enormous amount of work on an already burdened cohort of people in the world. But I think it's as they're engaging in the shift to ensure that the students are actually learning, students need to be open to not just taking the easy way, which of course there will always be those students, but hopefully they're not the majority or even the plurality ultimately.
Yeah. The temptation is always there to take the easy route. So trying to avoid the temptation and trying to use it in a more effective way can obviously we want to say that, right? But what is a practical mindset shift or first step that they can actually do, or something that would help them move from just this awareness and being like, okay, I get it, I want to use it in a more effective way, to actually confidently participating in a deeper manner, an effective manner with their AI usage?
Yeah, I think one of the elements of confident participation that particularly faculty and instructional designers need to remember is that some of their most human characteristics still have value. Some of the curmudgeonly laggards who in terms of diffusion of innovations are slow to adopt these new tools, they feel like this anthropomorphic nature of the tool is displacing them in some problematic way. I find that if a professional or even a learner or student can view the tool as an augmenting element of an individual's humanity, that helps them move or shift towards that confident participation, because they can remember that while the tool has strengths and limitations, they also, as the user, have strengths that will continue to magnify the tool and make it able to be wielded in a way that produces a really successful result. So, as an example for faculty or instructional designers, while AI is exceptionally good at creating dynamic, accurate content, although it can hallucinate and you have to check it, instructors, faculty, instructional designers, they're 10 times better at creating nuanced content, right? So, like, if I'm an instructor in psychology, I can ask AI to give me an old and tired reading of B.F. Skinner and behaviorism, and it will give me rats in boxes and classical versus operant conditioning, all these jargony things that every Psych 100 or behavioral class has in it, because that's what GPT is good at. It's good at looking at the lexicon and looking at the corpus of available, tired, old, repeated history of a particular subject and regurgitating kind of an average path through that journey. What an instructor can do on top of that, that GPT can't do, is provide some nuanced context to bring up controversies that the generative AI might ignore or avoid. For example, it's not really great science to study rats in boxes if you actually want to know about their authentic in nature or in vivo behaviors. A lot of the conclusions that can be drawn from rats in boxes don't have high what's called mundane realism. They don't apply to rats in real situations. And so some of the things that were concluded in the 60s and 70s by behaviorists and then applied, for example, to educational environments are problematic conclusions, problematic applications, problematic transfer of knowledge. Because just like you don't want to make assumptions about rats in boxes, you don't want to make assumptions about students in the classroom as if they're rats in boxes, which is some of what happened. And that kind of got out of control. A really thoughtful instructor of that discipline would be able to bring that nuance and that flavor and that excitement and that controversy to the topic in a way that GPT wouldn't organically do. And that act of feeling valuable, feeling like you can bring something to the table that a generative AI or a LLM can't do for itself, is part of that awareness of confident participation that our instructors and instructional designers need to have, that they still have value. In fact, the more people use generative AI, the more those alternative perspectives are going to deepen in value, because nuanced perspective is something that humans are really good at and LLMs are less good at.
Yeah, so I want to pivot off of a word Mitch used, augment or augmentation, because that is something that I think is really important for all users of AI to understand. AI is very gifted at doing a lot of complex things, discrete things. It's good at doing a lot of things, but there is something that is going to persist in the world going forward that I hope that people begin to understand better, which is again the role of human experience and human judgment AI is not out in the world. It is reciting um, the learned understanding that it has in its data set. But what it does not have is the real lived human experience and intuition that comes from being in the world. I think about these various articles I occasionally read, being a New Yorker, and about the intuition one develops of being a New Yorker, just based on a certain number of people in a certain amount of space, whether something peculiar is about to happen or about to break open. There's this general sensibility that one develops as a New Yorker. That kind of judgment, obviously that's a unique, peculiar example, but that kind of judgment is not something that resides anywhere in AI, and that sort of instinct, there's just being able to frame it and understand. I say this, and it's such a trope, so it's become a little bit of blather, but the whole really is greater than the sum of its parts. You can paint, repaint a painting, by Michelangelo, by numbers, and somebody could technically do that. But somehow the lived experience of the original artifact is different than what you get from simply printing it on a postcard or replicating it in some automated sense. So there's just something ephemeral in here that is of value. I wish that was easier to quantify, because if it was easier to quantify, it would be more persuasive. But it's there and it's real, and I want people to be able to understand that better, because I think it's going to make them feel like they have the agency to use AI in a way that's truly going to benefit them in what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, both really well said. And I think just to give our listeners some ease, we're still focusing and emphasizing, especially how important that human element is and maintaining the authenticity and integrity with what's being produced. And even as you said, Eric, just even the experience or the routes that led to some of these masterpiece creations, you can't replicate that with like a click of a button. Like, as we may try, and AI keeps getting more and more advanced with some skill sets, they can't get to that same level of the experience and actual human originalness that comes from being human. So, I want to end today's conversation on a little bit of a futuristic note. So, looking ahead to say just like 2030 or just any future we see, since we are innovating so fast, I can't really see if I can ask you about 10 years in the future. How do you see course authorship, instructional design, and faculty roles changing in AI native learning environment?
Yeah, so I think one of the ways that we have to change as institutions is that we're currently in a phase that I don't think will ultimately go that well, which is the phase of bolting on AI to existing educational spaces. When I say bolt on, I mean this is non AI native adoption of AI, right? So a bolt on is you have an existing set of content or learning environment, learning management system, and we're going to add to it an AI tutor. Or you have an existing digital textbook, and we're going to add to that digital textbook an AI ask your book feature. These bolt-on options, I I don't classify as AI native because they are easy to deploy, yes, but they fundamentally don't solve some of the problems in learning that students currently have in an era where all of the expectations were written 10 and 15 years ago, or even further, 50 or 60 years ago, about in terms of rubrics and what kind of papers we expect them to write. All of the performance expectations in educational environments have remained ostensibly the same, and simply bolting AI onto the content experience doesn't bridge the gap between the possibilities of AI and the realities of the rubric. And so until institutions, faculty, instructional designers have access to a new type of learning management system, a new type of learner experience that truly is AI native, designed AI native from the start, I don't think that we're going to see the gains that we hope, because the truth is that students, when given the option to participate with like an AI tutor, they tend not to use it. Very, very small fraction of students will engage with it because they have free alternatives. They go to Claude or they go to Gemini, and they prefer the answers that they are getting there rather than the ones being provided by their institution bolt on AI experience. As a learner myself, I've returned to some classes not only because I like learning and it's fun to maybe have another master's degree. What's the harm in another degree? But I also wanted to learn about what it's like to be a student, a real student with real grades and real stakes in the era of generative AI. And I can tell you as a learner, when I get into my digital textbooks, even though there's the Ask My Book feature that's an AI bolt on, I have found that it's not as friendly as me just using the book, right? Authors have been very thoughtful in the way that they've curated the paragraph structure, the content, the glossary terms, the progression of ideas from one section to the next. And engaging with the bolt-on AI actually interrupts my learning or interferes with my progress rather than making me feel like I'm moving faster. It actually makes me feel like there's something standing between me and the expert because the author was the expert and I want access to their ideas, not what has been regurgitated through an AI. And so these bolt-on experiences, I think, we're going to have to pass through this phase and get beyond it to truly AI native environments. And what that is and what that looks like, I think that's still being written, hasn't yet been fully released, and certainly is not ready in the culture of higher education to be fully adopted. And so I think there's a lot of open highway, but also a lot of change management that's going to have to take place before we truly are AI native.
Yeah, again, I think Mitch has articulated this quite well. As I think about your question and what does it look like in 2030, which is, oh goodness, only a few years away. But the pace of technological change is such that who knows what the capabilities will be when we get there. But perhaps an even more interesting question is, where will um, the world be, the population be, learners be, institutions be at that juncture? I think, this requires change management, which is, I think, exactly the right term for this. What's going to, I think, be required to fully achieve some of what we've invoked just in this conversation, is a good deal of fundamental change that ensures that learners are approaching and can see the value in approaching and utilizing AI in a particular way where it augments, it doesn't replace. Institutions of all stripes are going to have to likely evolve to make sure their role as being the stewards and the shepherds of learners is being done in a way that is truly serving them, and truly not simply enabling them to get a grade and then go out into the real world, and that the world itself is going to have to evolve to figure out the right way of cultivating the right potential employees, et cetera, who are going to further their own aims. Somebody with an A out of an institution of a particular pedigree may be less and less meaningless over time if we're not cultivating these learners in the right way along the way. So I think that's a lot of blather to say. I think there's a lot of change that has to happen in a lot of cohorts, and it's an organic process, and it's going to likely be a little bit messy with a lot of leaps forward and then adjustments and leaps backward. And hopefully there's some canary in the coal mine that inspires the rest of the world to begin following a particular model or way of thinking about this.
Eric, I love what you say about cultivating because it occurs to me that we're not only in the middle of a technological revolution. Whatever else generative AI is, it is technological. But more importantly, the cultivation that's going on is the cultivation of a culture of usage. And whatever else this is, it is a cultural revolution. And cultural
Great.
revolutions are much broader. They require a lot more a change, a lot more maturation, a lot more patience to figure out the rules of the road. I'm reminded like when cars first were invented, like in 1885, 86, laws didn't exist. And rules of the road, like a culture of automobile utilization and what to expect on the streets, really didn't come into place until the 1910s, 1920s, where literally over 30 or 40 years,
Right.
utilization and usage produced common understanding of what should be expected for this new technology. And it can be said of the automobile that yes, was it a technological revolution? Of course. Was it also a cultural one? Yes. The culture absolutely shifted and molded itself, molded around inclusion of that technology into everyday life and to expectations about what you can come to expect from any given day. And I think that generative AI, we're in the messy middle where there's kind of, yes, there's cars zooming around, there's horse-drawn carriages zooming around. People are fighting about which one's better, but ultimately culture is going to be what meets out what the new world looks like. You can't really control culture, but you can cultivate. And I like that word, that cultivation of the rules of the road of what to expect and what works well and what really ultimately helps uphold humanity in the long run.
Yeah, I like this. I know we were talking a lot about this and we covered a lot, but really, in the end, we are in such an era of unknown with some knowns when it comes to AI and this new technological revolution. But I do like how you described it, Mitch, as a culture because culture is ways we come together and this is what shapes how we go in the day to day and where we want to grow as a society and thinking about this AI integration, adoption, and intersection into our lives as humans, it really is a culture shift. Now, where is that shift going to go and to what extent? This is where we're in the unknown, but we're staying positive because we have some understanding, and as it grows, we're also growing. So, yeah. Is is a really great way to end our episode. So I want to thank you both for coming on to our podcast, EdTech Connect Innovators in Conversation, to share both of your insights and perspectives on this very timely topic that we're seeing pop up in higher education and EdTech forums. I would like to encourage our listeners to check out other episodes within our playlist of EdTech Connect, but then also consider checking out Educator Insights, which is more for our educators, or Tech and EdTech, where we focus a little bit more deeper onto the technology side for our discussions. Thank you both. And remember to stay curious, everyone, and positive in this AI era. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.